Hello everyone, welcome to Insights. My name is Nnamdi Odipo. This episode will appraise the imperatives for progressive economic reforms in Nigeria while looking at the painful yet necessary realities of such structural reforms. We'll also look at the debates which are still raging on genetically modified foods in Nigeria. It is clearly a case of compelling needs against public perception. Well, now my colleague Elizabeth isn't back yet on set, but we'll be having a segment this time around. So sit back and let's take you along as we get some insights into all of the issues that were raised. I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate calculation.
You know, many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Well, debates on economic reforms in Nigeria are highly emotional and quite spirited, depending on the company you find yourself these days. But think along this line for a minute. If we're largely agreed that Nigeria does require progressive economic reforms, can we then agree that it will take some time for these reforms to bear fruit? Right there, somewhere between when the reforms are instituted and when the required results are attained, is where we are right now as a nation, the short and medium term cost of reforms. Do I hear you say the cost is huge? Perhaps that is where the saying no pains, no gain comes in. Well, let me bring in Dr. Emeka Okengu, development economist and former consultant to the World Bank, to speak on the imperatives for progressive economic transformation in Nigeria, the ongoing reforms and their value for the Nigerian economy. Thank you so much for coming in, Doc.
Thank you
good to have you here on Insight.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you're aware of the president recently. That he recently doubled down on the administration's ongoing economic reforms. I'm sure you also followed up on the meeting between the president and the Corporate Council of Africa, as the CCA, where the president again admitted that Nigeria is in the middle of a challenging stage of the ongoing economic reforms. But he's insisting that there is no going back. Take it from the development economist perspective and reel out or tell us speak to us about the imperatives for progressive economic policies and reforms for a country like Nigeria, especially at a point or a time like this.
Okay, let's try to do a little bit of a disaggregation.
Okay.
Let's remove policy from reform and from program.
Okay.
In between, you'll now be getting diversification, you'll now be getting, new economic structures,
okay,
and then you'll now be getting, your reforms. Now, first and foremost, let's look at what is most topical, which is the removal of fuel subsidy. I mean, that's what everybody is blaming for Nigeria's economic goals.
That's true.
Okay. If you want to start from there, I mean, that's one of the greatest decisions. That's one decision all subsisting administrations in this country had always said that needed to go. So he needed to take the right political will, which is one other mantra you also find in Nigeria as a lexicon, political way to do things. So let us first and foremost agree that the most successful, reform or decision, if you may, that this present administration had taken was the removal of whatever it was that was called fuel subsidy.
Okay.
If it was under recovery, it was a subsidy, it was price differential, whatever it was needed to go. Okay, now against that fact that it needed to go, you now ask yourself, when it went, what did you replace with? Now, did you have an economy or did you have economics running? And there's a difference again, Nnamdi, I must tell you, between economics and economy. And what happens where you're operating economics and where you're operating an economy. If you're talking about, let's make it because we don't have time, the moment you talk about economy or economic development, you are talking about production. You're talking about the substructure driving your superstructure. Okay? Now, but if you're talking about economics, which is what it is we've had for a very long time, you're talking about basically markets. Okay, where you have goods and services, 80% of it's not within your time, driving your, economic programs. Are we somewhere in between there? So that we can actually begin to understand, in the first place, you do not subsidize what you don't produce. If you do, what it is price differential. It's important that that context is also captured. If we were producing petrol, we would not be subsidizing with cash. We would have been subsidizing with now what you call tax regimes. This is how you introduce sustainable subsidy. I don't know if I'm complicating this conversation.
You're making sense.
Okay, so that people can actually get it. That there is nothing wrong with the introduction of subsidies, but the moment you introduce subsidy to something some other person is producing, the only way you can sustain it is to keep paying the person's price differential, which was what we had. And against an economy, okay, that is not playing in the markets, in the international market, vis-a-vis the value of its products, then you are solely dependent on the person who is selling to you, to now determine, the costs and schedules of what it is you're bringing. Then you keep paying that differential. So this was what was happening with the first subsidy regime, which is at the heart of what it is we're talking about. Then if you're talking about, now the economic reforms that you're talking about, you can't do that from just the federal government perspective alone. The president has shown a lot of leadership, a lot of determination from the federal level. But do remember that the federal system is only just about 48% of the whole economic government of Nigeria. The state governments make, I think, about local governments put together about 52%. So if you do not bring them into that conversation, and we now have what you can be able to call the Nigerian Economic Development Program, it is no longer the federal government economic development program. Remember that there are two different bodies.
Yes.
The moment you make it a federal government thing, it is not inclusive of a subnational.
I'm glad you're taking, I'm glad, Doc, that you're looking at it from this angle, because it was an issue I actually wanted to take up with you. I mean, there are clearly significant challenges. I mean, you've thrown up the old mix and, I mean, what subsides in the past, and, we're talking about what people are feeling at the moment, the harsh realities of some of these structural changes that are taking place. And, I mean, one of the biggest concerns right now is not seeing translations of perhaps some of the immediate benefits of the reforms, maybe into welfare improvements for citizens, especially in the states and local government. You just referenced that. That's why I'm dialing in on this, Doc. If you'll be kind enough to just explain why the poor and economically vulnerable at these levels, at the state and local governments, are the ones most feeling the short and medium-term cost of these reforms. I mean, especially at these state and local government levels. Is it perhaps as a result of the seeming, what's the word for it now? Because we've talked about the concentration on the federal, and the states seeming to have this laid-back attitude to the whole issue.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually an entitlement mentality that I've built over the years. Okay, I'll give you a very typical example of how development works. There are three elements to development. Element number one is human resources that you must convert into human capital. Okay? If you do not introduce skills, if you do not introduce education, human resource remains what it is, brawn. Okay? But the moment you introduce skills, it becomes brain and brawn. And that is when you can now, capitalize it. If you want to use some layman's word, it becomes currency that you can trade. Okay? It becomes skilled that you can export. Now, the second is your natural resources. And natural resources also remain what they are until you're able to introduce technologies to them. And it is when you now introduce technology, which is why you have this lexicon, that a ton of iron ore is $100 as iron ore, becomes $1,000 as iron rod, becomes $100,000 as a chrome in a Rolls Royce, and becomes $1 million in expensive resources like relics and all that. So it is all about that value. Remembering again that gold is rock, okay? And then it becomes a ring that has value the moment you value process it. So the moment you understand that the major problem we have is that we have a lot of human resources that we have not done deliberate actions or taken deliberate steps to turn into capital. And how do you do this? You don't do this only by formal education. You do this by skills education. In fact, it is not formal education that rules the world now, it is skills education. And 80% of people who have acquired AI, you know, biotech, a lot of these existing new, you know, ICT-based things are just done through certifications and not through, you know, degree awarding, you know, long-term education. Okay, so
Yes.
even when you're an engineer, you find out that your engineering degree might not mean as much, except you're able to now go into that certification programs that can now make you, you know, give you access to the new world. Now, this is where I think we are all missing it. Then again, we have 60 million, some people say 83 million, others argue, of land, and everybody says arable. Now, why would you have 80 million or 83 million or even 60 million hectares of land? And let me contextualize this for you.
Okay.
The whole of Ukraine is sitting maybe under 60 million hectares of land, and they are feeding the world with wheat. So how come we are importing from a war-torn, still at war, and are still the biggest producers of wheat? What are they doing that we're not doing? And this is us with 320 dams, and we're importing 18 million metric tons of fish. What are we not doing well? What we're not doing well is just what I had told you earlier.
Yes.
We are not applying, you know, skills to our human resources to make them human capital. We are not applying technologies to our natural resources for them to be able to now yield what we can take into the market that can give value to our currency.
But look, are we perhaps seeing some changes already? Earlier on, you referenced income, human resources. I mean, that's what you're just talking about.
Yes.
You talked about technology processing. You talked about, but by talking about agriculture, you somewhat inferred or, you know, referenced employment. These are key indices for gauging, or these are determinants for, some of the determinants for gauging a country's GDP. So I am wondering, now from your perspective, how Nigerians should, you know, perceive these recent GDP growth figures released by the NBS, especially in relation to what life is right now for the average Nigerian. Would you dismiss the argument in some quarters that the GDP rise is more of a symbolism of growth rather than practical growth that impacts the quality of life of Nigerians right now?
That might not be very fair, but there's also some element of, you know, truth in what it is of intent. But I'll tell you why. The Nigerian economy, you can break into three broad sectors or segments: the underground economy, the informal economy, and the formal economy, which is where the MBS, you know, focuses on. Okay, there's never been any time, because you cannot even aggregate what you're not able to, you know, contain or conceptualize. Now, our informal economy, or where you have the real sector, you know, unfortunately is where you have 80 or 90% of Nigerians. That is where they habitate. But you don't have statistics on these people. You don't even have statistics on, you know, their yield. If you put all the whole hunters, perhaps people who are hunting, what do they call these, hogs, okay? And then you put them together and put a value onto what it is they are bringing out, you know, from wildlife, from their hunting expeditions. You might be shocked at how much, you know, that can contribute. If you look at the woman who is sitting down and frying akara, and you're looking at, you know, her output, okay, you might be shocked that, you know, as pedestrian, okay, and as low as what she's doing appears, she might be earning as much as somebody who is on level 8. Maybe about 50,000 when you now aggregate, you know, her total output. But because there is no formal system that captures, we don't have any data that captures, you know, people's outputs at that very base level. But what you do is that you have people who are complaining that they are not eating. And this is why when the MBS tried to rebase, okay, to say that less than 4.1% of Nigerians, you know, were actually unemployed,
yes,
they now rebased it using people who had access to at least 18 hours of some activity, you know, in a week or in a day or whatever it was they used. Now, this does not also negate the fact that there is a lot of lack in the land. And this is where we come to this entitlement mentality. Okay, take it or leave it. Everybody is feeling this pinch. But we felt it a very long time ago. If you remember, when they started using corn as a major cereals for both alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. I mean, it looked as if the world was going to come to an end, and we now developed that test board. Point I'm trying to make is that if we had the whole of the governors, the subnationals come together to now aggregate Nigeria into a land whole, vis-a-vis now allocating of land, it becomes a lot easier for us to begin to now build ecosystems. I can give you this for free. I'm involved in it, or I was involved in it. We built a cassava ecosystem, and government had a hand in that program that showed clearly that we are going to use cassava to generate 23 million jobs. And I can take you on, I can give you the facts. That cassava could grow in every part of Nigeria, and that even the better yields of cassava grew in the northern part of the country than its original.
And we could replicate it. We could replicate this for other targeted crops.
I said that program was completed, and this is where I bring to the fore what the president last meeting he held, with the chief accounting officers, and he accused some of them of also not being proactive in trying to promote the policies of government. I thought you were also going to bring in that in. But what I also thought the president could do was to say, okay, fine, I won't know everything and I can't know everything. It might be good for the president to set up some tax team to be able to say, if you have these bright ideas, if you had any program that had seemed it was working and you had any difficulties because of A, B, C, D, bring this to the fore.
So substantially, Dr. Okengo, what are we missing out on? I hear you talk about the subnationals. I hear you talk about, of course, in reference or in answering my question on the GDP growth, you talked about aggregating the informal sector. You did talk about the significance of knowing the percentage of the formal sector that is responsible for this growth that we have witnessed in the last quarter, fourth quarter of 2023. Would you therefore say in this moment that such economic growth, if consistent, can generate perhaps a virtuous circle of prosperity, maybe opportunities? If that is the case, how steady and consistent does it have to be? I mean, the kind of rise that we need to experience for growth, and what period do we have to witness this kind of growth so that it can begin to impact on poverty reduction and the improvement on the quality of lives of Nigerians?
For the formal sectors, yes, it will. But unfortunately, the informal sectors, the more you grow that, the more you don't also have people, moving from the informal sector to the formal sector because of this lack of skill, like I told you earlier.
Yes.
Because of this lack of education, lack of attrition, to education. Now, you have people who don't have formal education. You have also people who don't have skills. So even when you bring, a lot of these industries to come into Nigeria, you find out that a lot of them are faced, with the challenge of, the right human capital, the right personnel. Now, but you ask the question, where are we missing it? Where did you miss it? There are three elements that we've missed out as a country. The first element is elementary school. Is that elementary? Everything you become today, Nnamdi, I can tell you, was because of the quality of education you got at elementary school. Go and look at your...
Public education, for that matter.
Anything you've become today. Okay? The second thing is us not understanding the role of the steel sector. That whatever it was, that whoever it was that conceived, us, okay, starting with 4 huge steel rolling mills and a major steel plant, they understood it clearly. And the moment anybody who is holding down your steel sector is holding down your growth, and you can't grow without the steel sector. So it is central. The third is our science and technology. Because we're not also understanding that the world has moved into the realm of science, and as I'm having this conversation with you now, people in UK or whatever are watching us. It's not because we have 3 or 4 juju men, blowing smoke in the air. No. It is because people are connecting wires and we are linked to the satellite. That's how global the world has become today. And again, in doing this, there is this delink. I think we play politics, we keep playing politics, even after politics stops. And we never stop playing politics even in governance. Okay, and the moment, the moment somebody becomes president, okay, no matter what your political leaning was earlier, it's your duty, your social duty, to support that presidency. Ditto for the people who are at the local government levels, ditto for the people who are the subnationals. So we should be having a Nigerian, framework that identifies, how many people are in the states. And this is where statistics and data also now comes to play. We are not talking about statistics that you're extrapolating. And I'm sorry to say this, a lot of the statistics that MBS, releases are extrapolated, are assumed, or done through scoping studies. I don't think we have that national framework, okay, or capacity to be able to generate data on real-time basis. I don't think so. I would want to know if there's an MBS office in your village or in your locality, or anybody who from time to time, comes to meet you at the airport, to be able to gather some statistics, or even anywhere else. So I think these are all the main issues. At the moment we get it together, trust me, we have everything we need as a country to be great. It's just for us to put it together.
Dr. Okengo, unfortunately, my director just told me we're out of time. I had wanted for us to pursue, to further pursue the conversation you started on agriculture, and about perhaps take the model of the cassava hub that you talked about as a model to talk about other targeted crops and how to boost production and perhaps create a foundation for food sufficiency for Nigeria. I'd also wanted your opinion on FX, palaver as it were right now, and how best to go about that. But I think we'll leave that for now, and we'll take that up in subsequent discussions. Definitely, we will be bringing you back on this program so we can pursue these conversations. I would like to thank you so much, development economist Dr. Emeka Okengu. Thank you for your thoughts on this matter. By the way, Dr. Okengu is a former consultant to the World Bank, and so he's quite familiar with the issues of structural economic reforms. I'd like to thank you so much indeed for joining us on Insight.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
So we'll move on at this point to our next discussion. It's about genetically modified organisms, better known as GMOs. These GMOs are essentially organisms, whether they are seeds, plants, or animals, containing altered DNA. But we do seem to have some issues here, and that is despite findings which show that these GMOs offer significant advantages in food production, whether you're talking about increased yields, whether you're talking about decreased usage of pesticides, and even better disease resistance. There appears to be issues with regards to adoption, even in a country like Nigeria, with our national food needs. The somewhat suspicious public sentiments are impacting broad consumption of GMO-based foods, thus impacting the market for further investment, where, as far as GMOs are concerned in Nigeria. But then we want to know some issues. Are there researches done in terms of how GMOs affect human health in the long run? Let's bring in our guest on this part of Insight. She is the Director of Agricultural Biotechnology Department of the National Biotechnology Development Agency, a promotion agency for GMOs in Nigeria. Dr. Rose Maswell Gidado, welcome to Insight.
Thank you very much.
Very well. We would like for you to clear the facts from the fiction for us, and you will be doing that substantially in the course of our discussion. So we do know for a fact that Nigeria has a regulatory agency for GMOs. You talked about that off camera just before we started our conversation. In fact, that's the National Biosafety Management Agency. That's a fact. We do know that crops have been approved for engineering here in Nigeria. I think cotton, cowpea, maize, and soybeans. Now, I'd like for you to take a look, or to speak to us from an environmental perspective and perhaps the yield perspective that I referenced in my synopsis earlier, and tell us for a fact what you know about GMOs as against non-GMO crops within these two perspectives, environmental and yields perspective. What are the facts here when you look at issues involving GMOs and environmental issues and GMO and in terms of yields?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. That's a good one. The difference actually between genetically modified crops and the non-genetically modified crops, of course, is very clear in terms of yield, because we already have 3 crops that have been approved in Nigeria for commercialization, and farmers already have had access to these crops. We have the BT cotton, we have the BT cowpea, and then we also now have the teller maize, what we call teller maize. Teller maize is actually fall armyworm and stem borer resistant, and at the same time drought tolerant. The yield of teller maize is 10 tons per hectare, okay, while the non-teller maize, that's the local varieties that we have, I think the yield is about 6 tons or 5 tons per hectare. So you can see that it is very clear. And then for pod borer resistant cowpea, that is beans. Yeah. Beans, our pod borer resistant cowpea is 2.9 tons per hectare, while the conventional cowpea gives the farmer 350 kg per hectare. And it is also early maturing. The pod borer resistant cowpea matures in 75 days. Okay. While the non-pod borer cowpea will mature from 90 to 120 days. So the difference is clear. And then for the cotton, the BT cotton gives yield of 4.1 to 4.4 tons per hectare. And then the conventional cotton gives like 950 kg per hectare. So the difference is very clear. And then in terms of environment, in the environmental benefit we have, the cowpea, all of them are BT crops. And so the number of insecticide sprays, that's pesticides, that is sprayed differs actually. For the BT crops, you can only do 2 sprays. Highest spray you can do is 3 sprays. And those 3 sprays are not actually against what the crop was actually developed to resist, but against other non-target organisms, you know. And then, but the local varieties of either cowpea or cotton or maize or what, the farmers do like 8 to 10 sprays. In terms of cotton, it can even be up to 12 sprays. And so the number of sprays actually are higher. And as they are higher, it causes a lot of, environmental damage, accumulation of these chemical sprays, either on the crops themselves, the grains themselves. There's a lot of residual, chemical, on those this thing, and then it makes those grains actually not attractive, and then it gives us problems, especially when you export and all those things. Because I remember when the Nigerian beans was rejected, because of that in UK, and so the accumulation of those chemicals, and those chemicals, when it rains, the chemicals are washed down to our rivers and all. And then the accumulation of the chemicals again increases, what will I say? These gas effects, the greenhouse gas effects are being increased. The accumulation of the greenhouse gas brings about high temperature, and once there's high temperature, of course, the impact on the environment is no good. It causes global warming, the climate change effects also trickle in, and so on and so forth. And so environmentally, it's safer to use the genetically modified crops, because the number of sprays actually are being cut down from 8 to 10 to 12 down to 2 sprays. Yes. The highest spray you do is just 3. And so environmental safety, sustainability is there.
I hear you, Doc. Sorry to butt in here. I hear you, and I wonder what all of this implies for us as a country, especially with our national food needs. So, I mean, from a food security perspective, we know that GM plants, genetically modified plant crops, like you've said, if it is so designed to grow in suboptimal conditions where their non-GMO cultivar analogs are unable to flourish, I mean, shouldn't this be a big one for us in terms of national food security objectives?
It's a big one for us, in terms of national food security objectives, and it can also meet with this declaration of make us to realize this declaration that Mr. President has either put on, the emergency declaration on food security. Of course, it can make us to realize the goal of that emergency that has been put by Mr. President. Okay. Because on a small piece of land, if you grow a GM crop on a small piece of land, because most of the GM crops have protection against insect and pest, damage. So you have more yield, of course. On a small piece of land, you can realize a lot of yield because the problem of pest infestation has been taken off. So because the problem has been taken off, of course, even though we have many insects that many of the crops are susceptible to. But the most damaging, the target insects most times are the ones that cause the most damaging effects, like the maruca in beans and all, So once that problem is taken off, of course, your yield goes high. And once the yield is high for the farmer, that is profit. It means profit. The farmer makes a lot of profit because the yield is actually gives you more profit, more money, and then more empowerment, and then there will be more food, of course, availability.
Doc, I also like for you to clear an area for us. I mean, it's of utmost concern. I mean, and that's the area where critics are, where they bring in the nutritional perspective. But advocates and promoters like yourself say GM crops, as in genetically modified crops, have enhanced quality and nutrient compositions. I mean, critical for tackling malnutrition and associated nutritional diseases. Is this a fact? Is this something we know for a fact? Otherwise, critics will... Yes, please go ahead, Doc.
Of course it's a fact. Yeah, because with this technology, you can, most things are actually possible. You can genetically engineer a crop that is nutrient deficient and then make it, enrich it with nutrients, especially the micronutrients. We have the vitamin A, we have iron and zinc and all. For example, presently, the National Root Crops Research Institute, Umudike, has actually been carrying out research and working on cassava. Cassava is actually deficient in micronutrients and all, and also deficient in protein, but is highly rich in cassava. It can only, give you carbohydrate when you eat it. And so most of the people, in the East, in the South, they actually depend on that cassava. They eat cassava as their breakfast, cassava, gari as breakfast, gari as lunch, gari as dinner. So most of the children in those areas end up with stunted growth because of lack of the micronutrients, like the iron, like the zinc, like what. So Umudikena NCRI is actually working on a cassava that is enhanced already using this genetic modification technology, based on the understanding of the DNA. So cassava, iron and zinc, vitamin A, have actually been bred into the cassava, so that when you have access to the gari that has been made from that cassava, we call it Vika Plus project, then your child will have access to all those micronutrients. Once you have the cuttings of that cassava, that is it. So, is actually a novel technology. The technology has a lot of promise, you can actually achieve a lot. And then we also have the vitamin A rice, which has also been developed around the Philippines and I think that vitamin A rice has been commercialized. And we know how important these micronutrients are. Vitamin A, is to prevent, river blindness and all.
Yes.
And
is
so,
it that the rice that they call the gold rice or something?
The importance of iron. Pardon? Yeah, golden rice. It's called golden rice. Yeah, but
yes.
It's called golden rice as well. And even here in Nigeria, we've been carrying out research on a project, I think by Institute of Agriculture for Agricultural Research, Zaria. It was a super sorghum that was actually being developed, but it's still under research to have increased levels of protein and then iron and also zinc as well, in the sorghum. Because sorghum too is a staple food in the north. And so if you have access to sorghum that has these micronutrients in them, and sorghum is used as a weaning food. So once you use that sorghum as a weaning food, for the children, because malnutrition is highly prevalent in the north, especially northwest, northeast. I mean, whenever I go home and I visit hospitals and I see these malnourished children, I mean, there's even no time you will enter the children's ward, but the time you're out of it, a child has died. I'm telling you. Sometimes I weep. So, I mean, we need this technology. We need it like, any other thing. We need it so much.
And that is true, Doc. I mean,
yeah.
Yes, but I'm sure you're.
Every day.
Yeah, I'm sure. Then I'm sure you're surprised. I'm sure you're surprised at the level of resistance that it's getting out there, especially here in Nigeria. Not just coming from the farmers or ordinary farmers now, but even coming from persons and lighting groups, and even from some research institutes. And I'm sure you're surprised by that. And Doc, I tell you something. Yeah. As at 1 year ago, the research that we've carried out showed that over 30 different products, mostly imported from the USA, from China, India, and South Africa, labeled to be produced with genetically modified ingredients, are in the Nigerian market. Whether you want to talk about vegetable oils, you want to talk about cereals, noodles, ice creams, salad creams, and even food spices. There are fears, however, about the engineering, with a lot of Nigerians are worried that some of these crops are genetically modified to act as pesticides against target pests or to be resistant to herbicides, meaning that these GMOs might be accompanied by heavy doses of chemicals, which they say or claim might be heavily toxic and linked to serious health defects. Are you perhaps aware of any risk assessments conducted by the regulatory bodies on some of these products, just so we reassure Nigerians out there?
Yeah, anyway, this is a global phenomenon. No technology comes to stay without resistance. I tell you, even like you said, even the scientists, some of them are being paid pittance, by the environmental groups, just to resist, to come against it, to frustrate us that are actually pro GM technology. And so some of these beliefs, some due to, is ideological, some due to sentiments, but not really. It's not based on science. Their resistance is never based on science, because this is a scientific venture, and you know what science is. Science is evidence-based.
Yes. Indeed.
So, and some politics, because you have other groups, of course, the agrochemical groups, because this technology reduces the use of chemicals and what. So we have the agro-allied groups that produce chemicals, also fighting this technology. There are other group of farmers, that the organic group, So the organic group are there as well.
Especially the ones concerned about organic seeds. And using funds for their seeds.
The organic agriculture, the organic is actually an agronomic practice. It's not any scientific venture at all. It's an agronomic practice. I can actually decide to grow my GM crop organically using maybe the organic practices and all those things. So, but this is a technology based on science, rooted in science. And then talking about the safety of those foods, of course, this has been going on for over 30 years, from the US, in Japan, China, and what. And you know how US, how they love their citizens. If GM crops are poisonous, of course, I think half of US population would have gone. But that is not it. It's all about politics, and then nothing more.
Sure.
It's all about.
I'm sure we all do realize that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Doc.
but they are the highly scrutinized foods in the history of mankind. Before you come out with a safe and a wholesome genetically modified crop, before giving to farmers, you have to ensure safety all along the way. Safety is never compromised at all. They go through a lot of scrutiny and all, chemical composition and words. Everything has to be carried out, toxicity tests, safety, nutrition. You have to do everything. And I tell you, the standards for this, the standards are being developed by WHO, World Health Organization, by FAO, by OECD. They're the ones who actually develop the standards for these foods. And
Doc, I think this would be a great point to end our discussion. I'm sorry we're out of time already. We've overshot our time, but of course we would look for another opportunity this time around to bring you into the studio, so we do not experience this intermittent glitches that we've seen with the network connection via Zoom. It will be great to have you in the studio so we can handle and talk about these issues. I'm sure we all do realize at this point that public enlightenment is crucial for this campaign, even here in Nigeria, especially for the rural populace and the farmers, just so we enhance the acceptability of the new products and all of that. I'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Rose Maswell Gidado, Director, Agricultural Biotechnology Department, National Biotechnology Development Agency. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on our program. I mean, it's been great having you. But like I said, I look forward to having you in the studio so we can further this conversation. Thank you so much indeed for coming on our program.
Yeah, thank you.
Elizabeth Omoru is next.
Since the emergence of COVID-19, the drifting apart of societies has gained increasing attention in global debates, protecting and strengthening social cohesion. Now an increasingly central goal for all countries and the international community. Social cohesion, the German Development Institute says, is a key factor for sustainable development. It represents an essential requirement for achieving peaceful transformations to sustainability, to drive the implementation of the principle of leaving no one behind as set out in the 2030 Agenda. It makes communities and states more resilient in the face of crisis and facilitates change processes that benefit everyone. Social cohesion, political scientists insist, requires continuous efforts and adaptability to the changing needs and dynamics of society. Today, we will be talking about ways to identify and promote shared values, encourage dialogue and discussion, support diversity and inclusivity to foster a sense of civic responsibility in order to create a more supportive and inclusive nation. My guest, Mohammed Saleh Hassan, who joins us via Zoom, will speak to us. Mr. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
Thank you so much. Now let's hear from you. Is Nigeria a socially cohesive nation?
Yeah, Nigeria is socially cohesive, particularly if you look at Nigeria, we have a large kind of a family system whereby most of our people live together, work together. You can have a family of about 5 living in one compound. So it's not a difficult thing for us to be able to look after each other or one another and so on. And also, we also have the religious groups, being a Muslim, being a Christian, you have a church to go and you go to a particular community, you have a church that you meet regularly at weekends, Saturdays, Sundays to discuss. So I think we already have that one as Africans, as Nigerians, and we have also cultural societies that are bringing us also together, within our own communities. So Nigeria, I think we have a lot of social cohesion which can help us get out of the woods.
All right, in the face of diverse issues, religious, ethnic, communal, crises we've had in the past, are there strategies to help foster and unity within a diverse population like Nigeria?
Yeah, that is where, Nigeria is a multi-ethnic country, as we all know, and it's also a multi-religious country. But we have the two major religions, Islam and Christianity, whereby you have the pastors, you have the imams, which they are doing their own bit to ensure the unity of the people and the unity of the country, and to ensure that people are living well and people are behaving very, very well. And we also have the traditional rulers also playing their own part. We have community leaders. We have also the people like us from the civil society organizations. We are also talking to our people, especially at tense times like this, so that people will have to be spoken to at all the times. You have to keep in touch with them so that people will be able to feel comfortable and understand that we are passing a certain trend that is not going to be a thing that will be permanent, but it's just a passing trend.
All right, politically, let me hear from you. At what point do we need to look beyond affiliations, religion, and differences to build a better nation? And I ask because you are a politician.
Yeah, at this particular time, it's time for us to redeem all our pledges to our country. And as well, we should be able to know that putting our hands together, supporting each other is the best for us rather than thinking otherwise. This is the most significant time that we need to come and put ourselves together. And, people should not be thinking or talking politics at this particular moment. This is not a thing of politics, it's a thing of governance. And government is a collective responsibility, not just the responsibility of the federal government, but the responsibility of the citizenry as well, because the government will need the support of the citizens for it to be able to govern the country, for it to be able to walk and get us out of this woods. So this is time for us to unite ourselves, because we go to common market, we go to common, we share common everything as citizens of this country. If it is good with the government, it is good with the citizens. So this is time we forget about politics, political affiliations. We forget about religious differences, ethnic differences. We come together. Despite all this difference, we still go to the same market and we still feel the same economic impact. So it's time for us to unite ourselves, support one another, and support the government and wish the government well, so that they will be able to do what they are doing to ensure that we are out of this particular economic hardship. Because if you look at other nations, because this situation is not just here in Nigeria, but it is all over the world. If you look at it, the UK just got into recession a couple of weeks ago. We are in Nigeria, in Africa. We support ourselves, and we have a large kind of family system, so it's not going to be difficult for us. I think it is much more easier, to be done here than even anywhere else, because of the way we coexist, closely with each other, supporting each other at all the times, at community halls and all other places, places of worships and all. So I think we should be able to put that forward and, ensure that we become our brothers and sisters keepers, so that we will be able to get out of this.
The world is actually a global village, and the social media actually tools for promoting the good, the bad, and the ugly. How do we help our youth to be on the right track in building true values for nation building?
Yeah, there is need for us to get in touch with them through the same social media, and also remind them of our values, our African values, our religious values. That is where the duty of religious leaders, community leaders, and family heads and the rest of them come again. That we need to be talking to our young people, especially against social vices and so many other things, and what they are watching on social media, importing certain cultures and behaviors that are alien to us here. So we need to keep them in touch. We need to keep them much more closer than ever, so that they'll be able to see. Because if you look at when we grew up, when we were children in the past, you see that, your father mustn't be the person that will talk to you. If you go out of your house, if you behave awfully or something, an elder is always out there to speak to you and correct you, But this time around, it's the other way, So we need to come back to that, so that we can be able to change our society and have our society back as it is before, So the society used to be responsible for all individuals, not just the family, So now I think we need to get back that. We have to look at that again, and then be able to talk to our children, talk to our society. Don't think that this is not my son, this one is not from my family, that one, no, that is not it. I think we are all Nigerians and we are all living in the same community. Any negative impact in the society impacts all. An injury to one is an injury to all. That is how we should be looking. We should be able to look at it and then, keep the society warm, keep the society peaceful.
Since social cohesion is all about building values and upholding them, in doing this, let's talk about the government and the lead. How do we uphold social cohesion in the face of the reality before us?
In the face of the reality before us, what is very important now, you can see the federal government has been disbursing a lot of monies to the state governors for palliatives and the rest of it, which is very, very good. And it is important for the government to ensure that those palliatives get to the people that needs those palliatives to cushion the situation of economic hardship, because these are some of the things that are leading to frustrations and so many other things that are happening today that are unwanted in the society. And secondly, again, we also have to talk to other civil society organizations and also the well-to-do Nigerians to be able to also support the society, as we have an enlarged family system in Africa, whereby we'll be able to support each other. It's either, for example, you share a bread with your brother, not to take it to yourself all alone. So corporate organizations also need to discharge their own social responsibilities so that they will be able to cushion this situation. It's a passing trend and it will go. So all hands must be on deck. It is not just the responsibility of the federal government to distribute palliatives. We also have to discharge our duties. We need to redeem our pledges to our country by keeping our brothers now and sisters together, by keeping ourselves. We have to keep together in a family. We have to keep together in the society at large. We have to keep together in the country at large.
Mohammed Saleh Hassan, President, One Nigeria Group, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Insight this week. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insight. My name is Nnamdi Adipo. See you next week.